Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the kind of forest you don't walk into on purpose. The kind where the fog hangs low like it's watching you and the trees creak just a little too often, almost like they're gossiping. You're trudging through leaf rot and the occasional suspicious bone when you see it, a crooked little hut, not nestled in the trees, no, perched on them, giant scaly chicken legs, clawed and twitching, holding up a cabin like it's completely normal for homes to have knees. And inside, the one and only Baba Yaga. You've probably heard the name. A witch, a guide, a monster, a grandmother who eats people like popcorn? Depends on who you ask and how close you are to her oven. But tonight's story isn't just about Baba Yaga, it's about her house. Because at some point in history, this rickety little hut decided to walk. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air grows damp as you step deeper into the pines. You feel it before you see it, some low thrum in the soil, a pulsing beneath your boots. Birds have stopped chirping. Even the mosquitoes, which up until 5 minutes ago were treating your blood like an all-you-can-suck buffet, have vanished. And then you see it, a silhouette between the trees. No taller than a one-story cottage, but undeniably alive, legs bent, talons twitching, and that faint creak of wood settling, not under weight, but in anticipation.
You don't mean to get closer. Your feet just...
Forget how to stop. The hut turns, ever so slightly, as if it feels your gaze. One massive yellow eye. Wait, that's a window, glares from beneath the thatched roof. Smoke curls from a crooked chimney like a lazy question mark. You should turn back, but of course you don't. You knock. The door opens on its own. Inside, it's homey. Kind of. If your idea of home includes skull-shaped candle holders, herbs drying from rafters like upside-down scarecrows, and a faint scent of cat pee and cinnamon, you can't tell if you're cold or hot. The air crackles with something. Old magic? Mold? Both. And there she is, Baba Yaga, curved spine, nose like a ski slope, eyes that don't just look at you. They inventory your soul. She doesn't speak, just gestures to a stool that looks suspiciously like it's covered in human leather. You sit, mostly because the alternative is standing in front of her until your knees give out. She leans in, sniffs. Not from around here, she says, like it's a crime. You nod, because what else do you do when a 700-year-old forest witch starts sniffing you like a tomato at a market? She chuckles. Curious thing, aren't you? Outside, the hut shifts. You feel it again, that low, bone-deep shudder, like the earth is breathing. Or maybe the house is. And that's when she says it. You want to know why it walks? You don't answer, but your silence is enough. She throws something into the fire. Sparks burst like fireflies made of bone. The room dims, shifts, time loses shape, and she begins. Long before you were born, long before clocks even, there was no walking hut. There was only a cabin in the woods. Simple, static, but woods change. And magic, well, it listens. She leans closer. Her breath smells like mushrooms and secrets. It listened too well. You blink, and the fire's different now. Bigger, blue. Once, she says, the house stood still. Back when the trees hadn't learned to lie. Turns out, this whole story begins when the forest itself was young. Back then, the Slavic lands weren't chopped into countries yet, just endless, living woods. And people feared them more than wolves. Historians still argue whether the earliest settlers here truly believed in tree spirits or just didn't like camping. Either way, no one dared build homes in the deep forest. Too risky, too aware. But one family did, and their cabin, made of birch bone and stubbornness, wasn't like the others. Baba Yaga gestures, and you see it, the original cabin. No legs, just roots, carved with symbols in old, looping Slavic script. Some meant for protection, others for less friendly things. And at night, the house whispered, sometimes prayers, sometimes complaints. Wood has memory, she tells you, and this wood remembered everything. Your stool creaks, and for a split second, you wonder if it's listening too. Outside, the chicken legs shuffle. The house groans softly, like it resents being talked about. You think I made it walk, she says, but I only helped it realize it could. And then she smiles. Slow, toothless, terrifying. You start to ask more, but the room tilts, like a boat or a stomach lurch. The house is moving again. She doesn't even blink. Hold tight, Baba Yaga says. It likes to stretch after a good story. And suddenly, the walls bend, the windows blink, and the hut takes a step, just one, but enough to make your bones jangle like coins in a jar. So now you're in it, the walking hut, the chicken-legged cottage, Baba Yaga's mobile nightmare, and your new bedtime bunkmate. And you're only just beginning to understand what this thing is. Outside, the forest bends away from the path. Trees groan and step aside like butlers avoiding eye contact. Welcome aboard. The hut walks. Not fast, more of a lumbering shuffle, like it's nursing invisible blisters. But make no mistake, each step thunders through your bones. Inside, nothing rattles. That's the most unsettling part. No teacup shakes, no spoon clinks. The hut's interior moves like it's suspended in syrup, while outside, clawed feet gouge into ancient soil. You try to find your breath? Baba Yaga doesn't offer one. Instead, she throws open a cupboard and pulls out a jar labeled Midnight Marrow in a scroll that might have been ink or something darker. She slathers it on a hunk of bread, offers none to you, and chews like the bread insulted her. You're lucky, she mutters through the bite. It doesn't always let visitors walk back out. The windows wink closed behind you. The fire murmurs. And somewhere beyond the walls, you hear the forest snarl. You ask why she built it, why the legs, why the everything. She snorts. Milts, child, I bargained. Turns out the bones beneath your feet, the ones gently creaking with every step, weren't nailed together by hand. They grew, not from wood or stone, but from a wish, a cruel one. There's a reason the front yard is littered with bones. They're not for decoration. Step outside and the welcome mat is a ring of skulls. Small ones, large ones, a few suspiciously shaped like bears. Some still have teeth. That's just the perimeter. Baba Yaga shrugs, keeps the tax collectors away. You laugh nervously. She doesn't. And then she tells you the real origin. Once, a hunter insulted her. Nothing fancy, just a careless word. He mocked her nose, her hut, her smell, pretty much everything except the legs. Those hadn't sprouted yet. Baba Yaga let him go, or so he thought. A week later, he disappeared. His wife said he went to gather pine resin. His daughter said she saw feathers in the snow. Feathers, Baba Yaga says now. He wished for speed, for a house that could run from revenge. Well, wishes rot, and so she made a trade. Not with a god or demon, but with something called a leshy, the spirit of the woods. Mainstream historians sometimes refer to leshes as Slavic forest guardians, a bit like eco-conscious ghosts with a flair for mischief. But fringe folklore paints a stranger picture. Antlers made of roots, eyes filled with stars, and the unsettling ability to change size at will. Some villages still leave honey at tree stumps to appease them. Others whisper they are the trees. The leshy offered a solution. It gave her a talon, a single blackened chicken leg the size of a fence post. Still warm, still twitching. You plant this under your home, it told her, and feed it truth. Not food, not blood, truth, which in Baba Yaga's case meant secrets, grudges, the kind of things whispered at deathbeds and in locked attics. so she buried the leg beneath the hearthstone. The next day, the house shifted. Not walked, not even stood. But something groaned under the floorboards, and a corner twitched. You try to picture it a house, flexing like a cat, waking from a nap. Not adorable, not when it's made of sorrow and chimney soot. She kept feeding it, not meals, but stories, regrets, the names of people she'd wronged and those who had wronged her. And on the 13th night, the house stood, all by itself. Didn't have both legs yet, she shrugs. Hopped in circles for a week. Real nuisance. You chuckle. She stares. Wasn't a joke. The second leg didn't come easy. Baba Yaga had to trade something more painful than truth. She gave the hut her shadow. That's right, she has no shadow now. Step outside at noon, she won't cast a thing. Even the chickens avoid her. Historians still argue whether that's a sign of demonic pacts or just advanced solar physics. Either way, she claims the hut gobbled it up and finally stood straight. Both legs, both claws. And for the first time in Slavic history, a house that walked away from its problems. The fire hiccups. Sparks spiral. You blink and the world outside is new again. A different part of the forest. Or maybe a different time altogether. Trees shouldn't grow that close together. And did that one just blink? You ask if she ever regrets it. The walking, the loneliness, the skull-laced garden. She picks something from her teeth and says, not once. You get the feeling she's lying. The chicken legs clomp through something wet. Mud? Moss? A centuries-old battlefield lost to time? Hard to say. But here's the kicker. This forest hasn't changed. You have. Because now, when you hear branches creak, you don't assume it's the wind. You start thinking in footsteps. Claws. Intelligence. The hut stops. Mid-step, the fire in the hearth goes cold. You turn and Baba Yaga is gone. The door creaks open. Just a crack. Just enough for the mist to reach inside like a curious finger. Something waits beyond. But before you move, the house groans, loudly, like it's hungry. You remember her words. It doesn't always let visitors walk back out. And suddenly, you wonder, what if you told it? You've spoken, you've asked questions, you've breathed, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Because in this house, everything is an offering, even your curiosity. You're not sure when the legs stopped moving, but now the house stands perfectly still.
Outside, it's quiet. Too quiet. Not forest quiet, wrong quiet. No birds, no bugs, not even wind. Just you, the twitching candlelight.
And a sense that something in the walls is listening. Baba Yaga reappears without a sound, as if she stepped out from behind a curtain you didn't know was there. Her robes smell like wet ash and old honey. Still alive? She says, not unkindly, but definitely surprised. You nod. She smirks. Then you're doing better than the last one. You don't ask what happened to the last one. Instead, you ask the question gnawing at your spine. Why chicken legs? She pauses, just long enough to make you sweat. Then, very slowly, she reaches into a leather pouch and pulls out a single feather. Faintly glowing, black as sin, with a shimmer of bronze when it catches the firelight. She lays it on the table, like it's a relic. This, she says, is where it started. One cursed feather. She tells you the tale in a voice like falling ash, of a girl, not Baba Yaga, who lived long before even the bones of this forest formed. A daughter of a healer and a hunter. She was kind, clever, and doomed from the moment she saved a chicken that wasn't quite a chicken. Because this wasn't a clucking farmyard hen. No, this bird had golden eyes, spoke in riddles, and laid eggs that hummed. Locals called it kushka, a forest spirit in disguise. Or maybe a curse with feathers. Historians still argue whether kushka was a protective household deity or an omen of agricultural collapse. The girl didn't care. She fed it, named it, laughed with it, and in return, it gave her gifts. Feathers that cured fever, clucking advice in dreams, and the occasional beetroot with prophetic tendencies. But the village didn't see magic, they saw witchcraft. One day, they burned the girl's house to the ground. No trial, no questions. Only problem, they didn't realize the chicken survived. And it remembered. It found a way to bury one of its feathers, not in the earth, but in a curse. And not just any curse, one designed to transform a home itself. A vengeance not against people, but against the very idea of stillness, of being rooted. That feather, Baba Yaga says, was passed down through generation, forgotten, lost, found again, always drawn to women on the edge of the woods. Healers, midwives, outcasts. Eventually, it found her. Baba Yaga doesn't say where or when, just that the feather chose her. She buried it without knowing what it would do. Maybe she was hoping for a better roof. Maybe she was bored. Maybe she just liked chickens. Or either way, things changed fast. The house creaked, warped, grew stubborn. She tried moving out once, left the hut behind, and built another flat floor, 4 walls, no soul. But it didn't feel right. She came back, and the hut had changed. It had knees. You don't mean to laugh, but you do. Just a little. Legs aren't funny when they step on your enemies, she says, eyes glinting, or your neighbors. Then she softens. Just slightly. They weren't always chicken legs. Apparently, the legs changed over time. At first, they looked like tree roots, then bore limbs. Once for 2 decades, the house stood on goat hooves. But none of those worked quite right. The hut got stuck, itched, limp. Chicken legs, though. Strong, flexible, preposterously underrated. Chickens are survivors, she mutters. People think they're stupid, but they've outlived empires. Quirky fact, chickens were domesticated in Southeast Asia around 8,000 years ago, and somehow ended up on every continent except Antarctica, riding ships, caravans, and occasionally royal laps. There's even a Roman mosaic showing a chicken chariot. Whether that's artistic liberty or historical truth, well, historians still argue. Baba Yaga swears the legs have their own mood. They dance when she's happy, they stomp when she's angry. Once, when she got bored, they ran a marathon across 3 kingdoms before she could rein them in. You ask if they'll ever change again. Maybe, she shrugs, if the hut feels like molting. And now you realize something. The legs aren't just magical, they're emotional. She shows you a scratch mark on the floor.
That's from when it was jealous, she says.
You blink. Of what? An outhouse I built, she explains. Didn't go well. Apparently the hut kicked the outhouse into a ravine. Took 3 weeks to fish out her herbs. You stare at the feather still glowing on the table. It pulses faintly with every heartbeat. Yours or the house's? Impossible to tell. She puts it away, carefully, reverently. You ask why the house walks, she murmurs, because it's tired of being burned. That hits you harder than it should. You glance around at the skulls, the cracked teacups, the dried herbs that seem to sigh when the fire shifts. You understand, in a way that aches, that this house wasn't built to be scary. It was built to be safe, and safe things sometimes need legs. The hut shifts again, not to move, just to remind you it can. You sip the tea she offers, dark, sour, and oddly fizzy. It tastes like secrets that refuse to stay buried. Time to sleep, she says. You ask where. She gestures toward the oven. You laugh. She doesn't. You don't sleep in the oven. Not immediately, at least. You sit there for a long while, eyeing it like it might blink. Baba Yaga, of course, finds this hilarious. It's warm, she says, and if it wanted to eat you, it wouldn't need preheating. Thanks for the reassurance. Eventually, she hands you a thick woolen blanket that smells like cedar and sour milk, pats the oven's edge, and mutters a phrase under her breath that makes the flame inside momentarily turn blue. You climb in, cautiously. It's surprisingly roomy, curved inside like the belly of some great sleeping animal. The walls hum. The heat seeps into your bones, and despite every alarm bell ringing in your soul, you fall asleep. When you wake up, something has changed. It's still night, but the stars outside the window are wrong. Brighter, scattered like someone spilled glitter across a black sheet. The forest looks older, the trees are taller, the fog is heavier. Baba Yaga is at the table, whittling something with a knife made of antler. You crawl out of the oven like a reluctant pastry. She glances up. Did you dream? You did? You can't remember what, only that it involved feathers, and laughter, and something knocking on the walls from inside. She taps the tabletop. Sit. Story time. You join her, blanket still clutched around your shoulders. She points at the wall. You look, and there, somehow, impossibly, is a mural you swear wasn't there yesterday, carved into the wood itself. Faint but growing clear the longer you stare. It shows a house, this house, without legs, surrounded by trees and people, a little village, maybe peaceful. Before it walked, she says, it watched. This section of the story is stranger than the rest, and that's saying something, because the truth is, the hut was once a regular house, just planks, pitch, and nails. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, it didn't learn. But the wood came from a forest that wasn't quite normal. Old wood, she says, carved from trees that had names no one remembers. Mainstream historians might call it superstition, but fringe scholars, and one very persistent guy with a podcast called My Roof Hates Me, believe certain Slavic woods were sacred. Trees were thought to house spirits. You didn't just cut a tree, you asked permission. Sometimes, if you listened close, it answered. Well, the trees that built Baba Yaga's hut, they screamed, not with pain, with memory. They remembered the cold, she says, the flood, the fire, every axe, every scream, every winter. You stare at the mural again. Now it shows fire flames, licking the base of the house, villagers holding torches. The hut still has no legs, but its eyes, or windows, are glowing. It's awake. She leans back. That's when I knew it needed more than walls. It needed a way out. The idea didn't come all at once. For a while, she lived in that house like anyone else, cooked, slept, yelled at squirrels, but little things happened. Chairs that moved when she wasn't looking. A window that refused to face east. A floorboard that groaned differently when she stepped on it, angry. She tested it, whispered secrets into the walls, sang lullabies to the hearth, left gifts beneath the stairs. Hair, herbs, teeth. The house responded. Once she stubbed her toe and cursed loudly. The table pulled back. Not enough to help, just enough to acknowledge. Wood with memory, she says, is wood with opinion, and the house had many. It disliked guests, preferred thunderstorms, got along with spiders, didn't trust iron. She named it Domovic, after the household spirits in Slavic folklore. Usually helpful, usually invisible, unless you forgot to feed them. Whether the house was a Domovic or just housing one, historians still argue. One night, the house locked her out. No wind, no bandits, just rejection. I forgot its birthday, she says. You're not sure if she's joking. She spent that night in a tree. The house refused to speak to her for 3 days. And that's when she realized this wasn't a house, it was a partner. She began treating it like one, cooking for two, talking to the walls, listening when the creaks sounded sad. The transformation began slowly. One day, a stair stretched longer to catch her. When she tripped, the window blinked closed before rain. A kettle boiled without fire. You ask if she ever feared it. She shakes her head. Fear's not the right word. Respect, maybe, like you'd have for a clever dog, or a bored god. Then came the feathers, the curse, the wish, and the legs. But here's the weird part. Even before it walked, the house knew about walking. Baba Yaga swears it dreamed of it. She'd wake to find it tilted slightly, like it had tried to lift itself and failed. She once found chicken tracks in the mud beneath the floorboards. No chickens for miles. Some part of it, she says, was practicing. You sip the tea she offers, bitter, smoky, strangely metallic. It tastes like rust and autumn. It wanted legs, you say aloud. No, she corrects. It wanted freedom. You think of the bones outside, the villagers with torches, the fire on the mural, the feeling of being watched by your own walls. Maybe a house can get tired of standing still. Maybe it remembers the people who tried to burn it. Maybe it dreams of escape. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Baba Yaga offered it. Not legs, not power, just permission. You glance around the cabin. The wood is warm under your fingers. The walls breathe, almost imperceptibly. And somewhere in the rafters, you swear you hear a cluck. The sun never rises here, not in the way you remember it. Instead, the sky outside the window slowly changes color, from indigo to a pale, ash gray, like someone scrubbed the night out with steel wool. Light filters in as if reluctant, weaving through trees that lean too close and leaves that never quite stop trembling. The hut is already awake. You feel it in the floorboards before you hear it, the subtle creak of tendons, the shift of weight, the tightening of invisible ligaments beneath your feet. The legs stretch, the way a cat stretches, but less elegant and more existentially threatening. You step outside, or rather, the house tilts its porch just enough to suggest you might want to. Baba Yaga's standing barefoot in the dirt, arms crossed, eyes on the horizon. Smell that, she asks. You sniff. Earth, rut, a hint of sulfur, maybe gooseberries. Witch war's brewing, she says. You blink? A what? She spits into a skull-shaped mug. Don't get that tone. Every few centuries, someone gets bored and starts slinging curses around. This forest's practically radioactive, with old grudges. You've heard stories, of course. Old Slavic myths of rival witches who battled with plagues, with storms, with forests themselves. And always the ones who walked away weren't the most powerful, but the ones with the best escape plan. You glance behind you at the house. Exactly, Baba Yaga says, reading your thoughts like a grocery list. The legs aren't just style, they're survival. And now you learn the truth. There wasn't just one Baba Yaga, not originally. Historians still argue about this. Some say Baba Yaga was never a single person, but a title passed down. Others think she's a kind of collective consciousness, like a magical Slavic group chat with a lot of passive-aggressive energy. Whatever the case, there were others like her, witches, forest dwellers, healers, and not all of them got along. There was Zelenka, she says, counting on bony fingers. She grew wolves out of trees. Nastia the Bent, terrible breath, good with hexes, and old Anushka, the one who stitched bear claws onto her elbows. You stare. She committed, Baba Yaga shrugs. But when the fighting started, they had one weakness: roots. You picture it, cabins, rooted deep in the soil, no matter how magical. Storms rage, spells fly, curses collide, and these witches are stuck like oversized mushrooms. But Baba Yaga? She had a house that walked. The witch wars were short but messy. Rivers boiled. Hailstorms rained frogs. One village still has chickens that whisper in their sleep. The forests bled, literally saps like blood, screams from tree hollows. And in the middle of it all, a chicken-legged house, darting through the underbrush like a monstrous hen on a caffeine bender, dodging fireballs and collapsing timelines. Baba Yaga survived because her house refused to stay still. There was one moment, she says, eyes distant, when 4 witches tried to trap me. You're not sure whether she means physically or emotionally, possibly both. They made a circle of mirrors, magic ones. Reflected the house back at itself so many times, it forgot which direction was forward. That's when she learned something new about her hut. It hates mirrors, she says casually. Fun fact, Slavic superstition has long warned against mirrors at night. They're believed to be portals, or worse, prisons for the soul. Even today, some homes cover their mirrors during storms or funerals. The house panicked, not with fear, but with rage. It reared up, cracked every mirror by screaming, and then ran.
Yes.
Screamed. The house screamed. Baba Yaga claims it sounded like a chorus of wooden door hinges during an earthquake. She wrote it through 4 dimensions, 2 swamps, and a village made entirely of teeth. By the time she escaped, 3 of the witches were smoking ruins. The last one vanished into a fern. Not behind it. Into it. You wonder if this is exaggeration. Then the house shifts behind you, like it's proud. One of the porch beams straightens, flexes, just a little. After that, Baba Yaga says, they stopped calling me crazy. You ask what happened to the others. The old witch rivals. She doesn't answer, just gestures to a row of bones hanging like wind chimes from the eaves. They rattle in the windless air. Every house has history, she says. Mine just walks with it. You realize that's literal. The house carries marks, scratches in the wood from battles, runes singed into its sides, even what looks like a jaw print near the door. You reach out to touch it. The wood flinches. I didn't carve those, she says softly. They're memories. You think of the concept again, wood with memory. And suddenly, the idea of a house walking doesn't feel so strange. A house with trauma? A house with regrets? Of course it would move. Of course it would run. Baba Yaga tells you the house sometimes chooses its own path. When it's nervous, it wanders west. When it's angry, south. You ask, what it's doing now? She raises an eyebrow. You tell me. You close your eyes, feel the boards beneath your feet. Listen to the creaks, the tension, the low murmur of living timber. It feels alert, not tense, not afraid, curious. You tell her. She nods. That's the first step to understanding it. The house listens. If you treat it like a tool, it ignores you. If you treat it like a pet, it pities you. But treat it like a person, and it'll take you places. You glance at the forest beyond the yard. The path disappears into shadow. No birds, no breeze, no signposts. You realize you're not lost. You're exactly where the house wants you to be. You don't know what time it is. The light outside has stalled into that late evening gray that could mean sunset or dawn, depending on which part of the forest you're currently violating. The trees lean in closer now, like gossiping aunties, judgy, ancient, and possibly carnivorous. The hut has stopped walking. You think? Inside, Baba Yaga is humming. The tune doesn't follow any rhythm you recognize. It loops, skips, doubles back. It sounds like someone tried to play a lullaby in reverse. You find her crouched near the hearth, holding what appears to be a carved wooden bowl filled with something. It sloshes. What is that, you ask? She sniffs it, grimaces. Breakfast. You take a cautious step back. For you, she glares. For the house. And that's when it hits you. The hut doesn't just walk. It doesn't just think. It feeds. But not on food. At least, not your kind. Baba Yaga dips a ladle into the bowl and flings the contents onto the floorboards. Splatters in a sickly blue spatter. The house shudders slightly, like a shiver. Then a low creak rolls through the walls. Not pain, more like satisfaction. You swallow. What's in it? She hands you the bowl. Smell. You do, and immediately regret it. It smells like candle wax, wet stone, forgotten dreams, and a hint of parsnip. Somehow. You ever had regret stew? She asks. House loves it. And just like that, your appetite dies in its crib. She explains that the house doesn't live on calories. It lives on meaning, emotion, intention. The stronger the feeling, the better the flavor. Most homes absorb the mood of the people inside them. This one demands it. Once she fed it a memory from her childhood, just a small one. A time she got lost in the snow and saw the stars bend down to look at her. The house twitched for a full hour and refused to walk straight for 2 days. That was too rich, she mutters, like giving a toddler espresso. You ask how often she has to feed it. Depends, she says, on where we've been, what it's seen. If we pass through sorrow, it gets full fast. If we linger in joy, well, it starts to feel hollow. She taps her skull. Emotions aren't free. Mainstream scientists have long speculated about the emotional energy we leave in physical spaces. Fringe psychology calls it resonant imprinting. Some believe traumatic events imprint themselves like psychic graffiti. Others argue it's just your brain trying to make sense of creaky plumbing. But this hut reads emotions like ingredients. You notice jars on a shelf, each labeled in crooked Cyrillic script. Shame, lust, jealousy, wonder, sleep debt. One just says Tuesday. She explains how she bottles moods. Not like potions, more like recipes. A spoon of guilt, a dash of triumph. Stir in a pinch of childhood wonder, and you've got a feast. Sometimes, when she's low on supply, she tells the hut stories, like the time she turned a soldier into a dandelion, or the week she spent living as a shadow in a nobleman's bedchamber just to learn how loneliness tasted when wearing silk. You can't tell if she's bragging or confessing. She opens a trapdoor in the corner, revealing a hidden cellar. You expect shelves of preserves, maybe mushrooms. Instead, it's lined with mirrors. No, not mirrors, windows, to moments. One shows a young girl walking away from a burning cottage. Another, an old man crying over a broken violin. Each one hums faintly. These are meals, she says, sealed in glass. The house groans softly, not impatient, hungry. You ask if it ever gets too hungry. Her face darkens. It used to. And then she tells you the story of the famine. Not a normal famine, not wheat or rain, a soul famine. There was a time, she says, when people stopped feeling deeply, laughed politely, cried in private, loved like paperwork. The house starved. It tried to walk, but its legs buckled. Walls moaned. The fire died cold. Baba Yaga had to trick people into passion, stir fights, ignite romances, provoke grief, just to give the house something to taste. That's when the bones started appearing in the yard. They weren't victims, she insists. They were donors. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. People came here looking for transformation. Transformation hurts. You step outside. The bone fence shimmers in the morning mist. Skulls smile with hollow patience. Famers form neat railings. Some bones are ancient, others alarmingly recent. And the hut sighs. A sound like settling dust. Or maybe a lullaby exhaled through wooden lungs. You feel it now. The house is watching you. Not maliciously, just curiously. It wants to know you. And you wonder, what will it taste if it feeds on you? Not flesh, not blood, emotion. What memories did you bring into this place? What fears followed you in like shadowy pets? What secret aches still sit behind your teeth? You step back inside. Baba Yaga is holding a ladle again. She dips it into the stew, offers it to the house. A single drop falls onto the floorboards, and the whole room shudders. Somewhere in the rafters, a giggle echoes. The walls swell. The legs outside take one small, eager step. The house is full again, and it remembers what it means to move. The house is humming, not in a musical way, more like a machine waking up. The floor vibrates beneath your feet, softly, rhythmically like a heartbeat made of wood. Outside, the legs stretch again. You swear you hear joints click. Not bone, not metal, something else. You step toward the hearth, but Baba Yaga's already there. She opens a low round door in the floor beneath the rug, a door you could have sworn wasn't there yesterday, and gestures, "Come on," she says. You wanted to understand it. You hesitate. Or, she shrugs, you could stay up here and clean the cauldron. You descend. The air below the cabin smells different, warmer, denser, and somehow older. You duck through a narrow crawl space and emerge in the belly of the house. And there it is. The secret no one talks about. The place that no folk tale ever quite describes. The undergut of the hut. It's a cavity, round, ribbed, pulsing with faint reddish light. The walls are lined with struts and rods and bones, but not randomly. They're fitted like clockwork. Tibias act like levers. Femurs anchor gear like discs. Rib cages, inverted and hinged, work as pressure gates. You step carefully. Everything feels alive. There's a central column, what might be called a spine, running from the floor to the ceiling. Around it, veins of rope, tendons of twisted vine, metal parts blackened with age. You see a hammer wedged into a jawbone, a bellows connected to something that breathes. Looks like a nightmare made by an engineer, you whisper. Baba Yaga grins. Exactly. She squats near a row of strange symbols etched into what appears to be a fossilized ox pelvis. People always think magic and machines don't mix, she says. Those people are lazy. Historians still argue whether Slavic spellcraft ever overlapped with early mechanical science. There's a popular theory about a forgotten Eastern tradition of clockwork golems and bone automatons, but most academic institutions call it fringe nonsense. You're standing in the nonsense right now. Magic's just an operating system, she explains, tapping one of the bones. It vibrates. A nearby gear groans and shifts. You watch the whole mechanism twitch, then stabilize. She tells you the bones didn't start this way. At first, they were ornaments, then support beams. But the hut changed. Adapted. One day she found a squirrel skull fused into the wall like a bolt. Some houses grow mold, she says. Mine grows architecture. You look closer and realize many of the bones aren't human. There's a wolf vertebra socketed beside a chicken femur, a jaw that might belong to a lynx fused with what looks suspiciously like a kneecap with runes carved into it. And all of it moves. Slowly, subtly, with purpose. She shows you the engine heart, a pouch of stitched skin that beats faintly when the hut walks. It's surrounded by spokes and branches, suspended in a sling of cobwebs and copper thread. You can hear it thump, thump, click, thump. What powers it, you ask? She shrugs. Memories, regret, the occasional lightning strike. Apparently the heart isn't original. She crafted it during a blizzard, using fabric from her first shawl and hair from a dead lover's comb. It hurt, she says, but the hut needed a pulse. You wonder aloud whether the whole structure is alive, or if it's just wearing life like a well-tailored coat. Baba Yaga considers that it's alive enough. Then she opens a hatch. Behind it, glowing faintly, is something you didn't expect. A scroll, etched into bone, wrapped around a tiny rotating spool. Every time the hut moves, the scroll turns slightly. Baba Yaga calls it the leg codex. It's rewriting itself, she says. Has been for years. You ask what it's writing. She smiles, places it's being, places it wants to go. So the hut has a memory and a dream. You sit in silence, listening to the gentle churning of the machine beneath the house. It groans like it's stretching. A rib cable tightens. A gear spins. Somewhere above, the ceiling creaks in response. You realize this whole space functions like a nervous system. The legs don't just move, they respond. When Baba Yaga is in danger, they run. When she's angry, they stomp. Once, she says, they danced for 3 days straight after she told a joke that made the house laugh. You raise an eyebrow. Every house likes a little joy, she says, nodding kindly. You ask what happens if something breaks. She pauses. It doesn't. Then she shows you a panel of mismatched bones, like a patchwork quilt of creatures. It replaces itself, she explains, but not randomly. It chooses. Apparently, the house once replaced a cracked vertebra with the spine of a musician who died weeping into a lute. The legs walked with a rhythm for weeks, she recalls, kept waltzing in the mud. You wonder what kind of soul lives in this thing, or whether it even has one. Baba Yaga kneels beside the engine heart, places a hand on it. Not a soul, she whispers, a hunger. You ask if the bones come from her enemies. She shrugs. Sometimes from friends, sometimes from beasts. The house doesn't care who you were, only what you felt. Because feeling, as it turns out, is what powers the hut. Not wood, not nails, not magic runes. Emotion. You ask if it's dangerous. She gives you a long look. So are you? The hut shifts, the floor tilts, the heart clicks once, then settles. You climb back up through the hatch. The floorboards welcome you like an old dog rising from a nap. The windows blink, the walls sigh, and the legs take a step. The step is silent, but somehow you still feel it, not in your ears, not even through the floor. It pulses through your chest, like a memory someone else is having inside your body. You're back in the main room now. The hearth glows low. Shadows sway across the walls like soft dancers with broken spines, and the teacups have resorted themselves, alphabetically if you're not mistaken. The Baba Yaga stands by the window, staring into the thick woods as if she expects the trees to blink. You ask her something you've been chewing on since the first creak of those legs. How did you do it? Not feed the house, not patch the bones, not whisper to windows. I mean, how did you make it walk? She doesn't answer at first, just walks over to the kettle, pours herself a mug of something too dark to reflect light, and says,
I didn't.
Then, after a beat, I spelled it. You sit down slowly. She sits across from you, her joints making the kind of sounds that suggest they once belonged to someone less lucky. And so begins the lesson. Not in a witchy cackle sort of way. There are no flashbangs of glittery light, no bubbling cauldrons, no frogs in sight. Just spellcraft. Real, practical, Slavic spellcraft. It starts with naming. Everything wants a name, she explains. Even the things that pretend not to. She named the hut something she's never spoken aloud again. It's not for humans to hear, she says. Even I forget it sometimes. The house remembers for me. Next came binding. Not chains, not rope. Binding through story. Baba Yaga wrote a tale by hand, in blood on birch bark, about a house that had legs. A house that ran from fire. A house that protected its witch like a wolf guards its wounded. She whispered that story into the rafters. Every night, for 100 nights. And on the 100th night, she says, the stairs blinked. Then came the offering. She gave it a feather, a shadow, a name. And finally, herself. I told it to remember me, she says, even if I forgot who I was. And that's how you spell something into life. You ask if it's necromancy, or alchemy, or something older. She smirks. Yes. Historians still argue whether Slavic witchcraft had distinct schools like Western occultism, elemental, spiritual, healing, hexing, or if it was all one tangled braid of song, death, and seasonal vegetables. Baba Yaga says it's simpler. There are only two types of magic, the kind that asks and the kind that takes. You wonder aloud which kind she used. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. Both. Then she stands, walks to a cabinet made from mismatched doors, and opens it. Inside, hundreds of tiny spell tokens. Some are carved from bone. Others look like dried fruit. One's clearly a deflated balloon with runes scratched into it. She pulls out a tiny wooden leg, whittled crudely, rough around the ankles. This, she says, was my first try. You ask what happened. It walked, she says. A pause. Just not when I wanted it to. Apparently, the leg got up one night and scuttled around the hut for hours. She found it chewing on the pantry, thought it was a mouse, until it winked, so she learned to anchor her spells, to bind emotion to object. She explains it like it's common knowledge, how every spell needs a center, a gravity, a why. A leg walks because it wants to go somewhere, she says. So I gave the house a destination. What destination? She looks at you. You. You freeze. She chuckles. Not you, but the idea of you, the idea of the next person. You realize she spelled the house to walk toward people who need it, people who might carry stories worth feeding it. You are fate. You laugh, because the only other option is panic. But she's already explaining the last part of the spell. Soul fusing. No big rituals, no goat sacrifices, just one moment where she stood in the heart of the house, wrapped in its walls like a coat, and said, "If I die, you remember me. If you die, I'll rebuild you." A vow. She doesn't say it dramatically. No cinematic music swells, no thunder cracks, just a tired voice over a cold mug. And yet, you feel the weight of it. This wasn't a witch showing off. This was a woman building a home that would never leave her. She didn't animate the hut out of ambition or power. She animated it because everything else, people, villages, memories, moved on. So she built something that could move with her. And she made sure it would outlast them all. The fire crackles. The walls murmur. You ask if the spell will ever wear off. She tilts her head. The legs are stronger now than ever, she says. And suddenly, you understand, the house isn't her servant. It's her companion, her familiar, her shadow made of cedar and chicken ankles. You wonder what happens if she dies. She shrugs. Maybe it walks without me. Where would it go? She grins. Wherever it's needed. You feel the floorboards shift again. The legs creak softly. And outside the window, the trees lean back, just enough to make a path. The path outside the window wasn't there 5 minutes ago. But now the trees bend gently aside, branches raising like curtains, moss curling back from the roots, as if nature itself has been instructed to move, and the house obeys. Without fanfare, without warning, it simply begins to walk again. You brace for the usual jerking motion of footsteps, but this time, the movement is graceful, rhythmic, the kind of stride you associate with parades or lullabies, the kind of pace that makes you forget you're technically riding on a war-ready piece of biomechanical chicken furniture. Baba Yaga has vanished, as she often does. So you watch the world through the crooked window, noticing how the forest changes as you pass, thicker trees, older moss, animals that stare just a second too long. You spot a fox with 2 tails, a deer made of antlers, a rock that's breathing. Then the light shifts again. You'd swear it's dawn, but the sky darkens instead. Stars begin appearing, bright, erratic, some red, some green, then 2 moons, one real, one unsure. You call out to Baba Yaga. She emerges from the oven with a mug in one hand and a spoon in the other. "Oh," she says, "we've crossed the seam again." You blink. The what? She gestures with the spoon. Not every forest stays in one place or one time. Seam nights slip between calendars. That makes 0 sense. But somehow, you get it. This is the realm where clocks become decorative, where the present is a polite suggestion, where rituals matter more than hours. It's time for the rooster sunrise and moon milk. That's not a metaphor. She opens a cabinet filled with bottles, ceramic, glass, a few corked gourds, all labeled with strange lunar symbols and dates that haven't happened yet. She grabs one labeled Luna Vena, third waning, and pours it into a bowl carved from petrified bread. The liquid inside glows softly, thick, creamy, with a shimmer that reminds you of dreams you can't remember, but still wake up crying from. "You'll want to sip this slowly," she says. "It helps the body keep track of its own timeline." You ask, what happens if you don't? She shrugs. "You might remember your funeral before your birthday." You sip. The flavor is impossible to describe. It tastes like snowmelt and lullabies, like the first time someone told you they loved you and meant it. It calms the blood. Meanwhile, Baba Yaga takes out an egg, a large one, pale gold with tiny runes etched across its surface. She taps it gently. It cracks open, not with yolk, but with light. Inside is a tiny, glowing rooster, entirely made of flame and dust and rhythm. It doesn't crow, it pulses. And with each pulse, the hut steps once more in sync. Rooster sunrise, she mutters, keeps the house in beat. Without it, we drift. You ask, drift where? Her grin returns. Into places that aren't ready for us. She tosses a pinch of salt over her shoulder, then stirs the moon milk into a pot of simmering porridge. The smell is intoxicating. Lavender, honey, and something just off enough to remind you this is still a witch's kitchen. The hut suddenly stops, but you don't fall. The house compensates, bending its joints like shock absorbers. You barely notice the landing. The window fogs with condensation. You look out and gasp. The forest is gone. In its place is a field of sleeping giants. Not a metaphor. Actual stone bodies, the size of ships, curled beneath moss and flowering vines. You can't tell if they're statues or just napping. They won't wake, Baba Yaga says. Not while the hut hums. Apparently, this is a resting ground, a forgotten dimension between Slavic myths and moonlit fever dreams. Some say the giants were the original inhabitants of the world, born from stars and rooted in songs. Historians, of course, still argue whether giants ever existed at all, or if they were just elaborate metaphors for Tsarist egos. But these aren't metaphors. One exhales. You watch mist curl from its nose. The rooster glows brighter. The house leans forward, as if bowing, and then it sings, not a song, not in notes, but in frequencies. The walls vibrate gently, the legs step once, and then stand still. Every house has a sleep cycle, Baba Yaga explains. Ours is just complicated. You sip more moon milk and watch the stars rotate in the wrong direction. You feel a gentle pull behind your eyes, like your dreams are being reshelved alphabetically. You'll want to sleep now, she says. The house is going to dream. You look at her. The house dreams? She nods. Why else do you think it walks to places no map remembers? You lie down on a rug made from woven shadows and moth wings. The floor is warm. The walls are swaying gently. The ceiling flickers between rafters and constellations. Baba Yaga hums that backward lullaby again. The last thing you hear before slipping under is the soft, steady cluck of the rooster's light. And the house, breathing around you like a cradle made of stories. You wake up to the smell of toast. Not normal toast. This is richer, deeper, as if someone managed to caramelize warmth itself and spread it over reality. There's also a faint trace of pepper. No, not pepper. Something spicier, older, like the scent of a library that once burned down, rebuilt itself out of ash, and now serves tea. Baba Yaga is already awake, of course, sitting cross-legged on the ceiling. Yes, the ceiling. She's spooning jam onto a slice of gravity-defying bread. Upside down, like this is a completely normal morning. You blink. She doesn't. Don't worry, she says. The house is still dreaming. You glance around. Everything is tilted slightly left. The rug curls at the edge like it's trying to decide if it wants to become a scarf. One of the chairs now has antlers. The spoon in your teacup keeps stirring itself. Welcome to dream mode. When the hut dreams, Baba Yaga explains, it remembers things that never happened, and sometimes things that haven't happened yet. You ask what kind of things. Sometimes it remembers cities that no longer exist. Other times it dreams of chickens. Pause. Big chickens. And that's when she brings it up, the chickens of the apocalypse. You laugh? She doesn't. You think meteors ended the dinosaurs? She says. Try a prehistoric poultry uprising. She points to a faded tapestry near the hearth. You hadn't noticed it before. Woven in rough wool, it shows an enormous chicken, easily the size of a tank, with 6 wings and what looks suspiciously like battle armor. Beneath it, a smoking village, broken swords, a terrified knight crawling toward the viewer. That's not real, you whisper. Baba Yaga shrugs. Historians still argue. She tosses a book onto the table. It's thick, bound in something feathery, and titled Cluck Ragnarok, A Beak in Time. Inside, maps of ancient foul empires. Schematics for chicken saddles. A family tree that ends with a red line straight to Baba Yaga's hut. You stare at her. She sips her tea. You're saying the house walks on chicken legs because it's descended from a race of cosmic poultry? She nods. You're not joking? I never joke about chickens. Apparently, long before humans, there existed a lineage of hyper-evolved birds that could bend time. They didn't fly, they ran across continents, across timelines, across dreams. Some nested in the roots of Yggdrasil, others laid eggs in volcanoes. One allegedly whispered the secret name of fire into the ears of Neanderthals. And eventually, they vanished. Baba Yaga believes they didn't go extinct. They withdrew. Too many humans, too few mysteries, she says. So they shed their feathers, left behind relics, like the legs beneath this house. You look at the floor, the boards shimmer faintly, you hear the softest cluck like an echo under your skin. And now the dream starts to turn. Outside the window, the sky is no longer sky. It's eggshell cracked, with veins of gold light leaking through. The ground moves like dough beneath the hut's feet. You ask where you are. Baba Yaga tilts her head. You're walking through an egg memory. Apparently, when the hut dreams deeply enough, it retraces its ancestral steps, through evolutionary time, through myth, through the feathered lineage of survival. She opens the door. You step outside and gasp. The world is feathers, not floating, not scattered. The trees are made of plumes. The mountains are fossilized wings. The rivers glisten with yolk-like flow, winding through hills shaped like nests. And overhead, enormous shadows, chicken-like, yes, but with too many eyes, too many knees. They don't seem to notice you. The hut moves silently, reverently, one step then another. Baba Yaga bows. You follow suit. These are the elders, she whispers. The ones who came before legs, before flight, before houses. One of the shadows lands in the distance, flattening a mountain of feathers. The ground shakes, the hut trembles, but doesn't stop. You realize now that this isn't just a dream, it's a pilgrimage. The house walks here, not to feed or flee, but to remember, to honor what it was born from. Because even if you spell a house into life, even if you bind it with names, wire it with bone, feed it with emotion, it still needs something to believe in. And this is its mythology. You whisper, why chickens? Baba Yaga closes her eyes. They're ridiculous, fragile, overlooked, but they survive. They always survive. And in a world where gods fall, empires collapse, and witches vanish into folklore, survival is its own kind of sacred. You return inside, the ceiling has flipped back to normal. The jam is gone, the tea is cold, but the house is still walking carefully now, tenderly. Like a child returning from a family reunion with too many feelings. To explain, you sit beside the hearth. The dream fades. Reality returns, gently. And beneath your feet, the legs keep stepping, one after the other, carrying centuries of memory forward. The dream ends with a sigh. Not yours. The house it's subtle, like the exhale of a beast that's been holding its breath for 100 miles. The glow from the feathered dreamscape fades, the sky hardens back into clouds, and the bones of the forest begin to reassemble themselves. Trunks rising, moss curling in reverse, as if the woods were paused and are now reluctantly hitting play again.
You're still by the hearth.
Your teacup is full again, of something different. Smokier, it smells like ink and metal, and the end of things. Baba Yaga slides a heavy book across the table. Its cover is cracked leather stitched with what looks like fishing line and teeth. Across the front, burned into the hide, it reads, "The ones who thought they could." She says nothing. So you open it. The first page has a name, a knight's name. The script is sharp and deliberate, but you can tell the writer hated the man. Ink spatters, words stabbed into the page. You keep reading. This is the story of the time. A knight tried to conquer Baba Yaga's hut. Sir Dimitri of the Thorn Cross. Tall, righteous, an entire jawline sculpted out of delusions. He'd heard tales of the hut, called it a witch's trick, and decided it was conquerable. Historians, in their ever-charming naivety, claim he was on a holy mission to cleanse the forest of unholy structures. But fringe researchers and Baba Yaga herself remember it a bit differently. He wanted a trophy, she mutters, something that walks and obeys, thought he could ride it into legend. The knight arrived with banners, songs, and a squire who tried very hard not to cry. He announced his challenge outside the hut one fog-heavy morning, drew his sword, demanded Baba Yaga show herself. She didn't. The house did. The legs unfolded slowly, gracefully. No rush. The talons flexed. A stair folded down. The hut turned its face, those front windows toward the night, and blinked. Sir Dimitri took this as disrespect, so he charged. You pause in the story. He charged the house. Baba Yaga raises an eyebrow. You expected chess? The knight ran, sword raised, shouting something about purity and eternal fame. The hut didn't move. Not at first. It waited. And then, when he was 2 paces from its threshold, it stepped sideways, graceful, like a matador avoiding a cow with delusions of grandeur. Dimitri stumbled. The hut kicked. Not hard, just enough to send him flying into a pile of screaming bushes. You ask why the bushes were screaming. She shrugs. They do that sometimes. Dimitri tried again and again. Each time the hut moved just enough. A hop here, a pivot there. At one point, it leapt over him and landed with the delicacy of a dancer. Baba Yaga watched from the rooftop, drinking broth. Finally, the knight grew clever. He ordered his men to surround the house, rope it, trap it, tether the legs. It worked for about 3 seconds. Then the house lowered itself, the legs bent, the structure crouched, and the roof flattened like it was preparing to nap. Which is when Dimitri made his mistake. He stepped inside. You glance up from the book. Baba Yaga is smiling. The kind of smile you make when someone's about to step on a rake and you let them. Inside, the knight found what you found. A hearth, a table, skulls, and nothing else. No witch, no magic, no threat. He called it a trick. But then the door vanished. The walls twisted, and the floorboards grew teeth. He screamed like a goat being eaten by another goat. Baba Yaga says, sipping from a mug labeled regret, lightly salted. The house didn't kill him. It confused him. Every hallway led back to itself. Every window showed a different season. At one point, he opened a cupboard and found his own childhood inside. His mother's hands, his first lie, the guilt still trembling behind his ribs. You ask if that's literal. She nods. The house made him feel, and he hated that. Eventually, he tried to fight the walls. He stabbed the chimney. It bled smoke. He slashed a stair. It moaned. And then the floor collapsed and swallowed him whole. Not gone, just absorbed. You flip the book's final page. There, etched into the margin, is a single line. Still stomps twice on cold mornings, one for each of his boots. You look at Baba Yaga. She sets down her mug. Every so-called hero thinks they're the first to challenge the house. They think it's a monster to slay, a fortress to conquer, a puzzle to solve. She leans in. But the house isn't a beast. It's not a battleground. It's a mirror. You ask what happened to the squire. Oh, she says, he left with soup and a new purpose in life. Works as a librarian now. Outside, the hut shifts again. One leg lifts, then another, and it begins to walk toward a different kind of forest. One where the trees carry shields and the wind smells faintly of forgotten pride. The house walks, not to escape, not to fight, but to remind the world that not everything that moves needs permission. The air outside grows heavier. Not colder, just thicker. Like the sky is full of things it hasn't said yet. The forest opens into a wide, mist-laced meadow, and the grass folds beneath the chicken feet like it's trying not to wrinkle. The hut walks slower now, almost reluctant. Baba Yaga steps outside. No cloak, no staff, just a tattered shawl and boots stitched from the night sky. You follow her. The field stretches endlessly in all directions, but you don't feel lost. You feel watched, not in a threatening way. In the way an empty theater watches its audience. Expectant, ghosted. What is this place, you ask? She exhales. This is where the hut ran. You look at her. She doesn't look back. Long ago, she says, before it trusted me completely, it tried to leave. The hut didn't rebel all at once. It started with little things, turning its back to her in the morning, refusing to follow a command, locking the door for hours. Once it folded into itself and wouldn't unfold again for 2 days. I said something I shouldn't have, she mutters, told it was just wood and spells. She pauses. I heard its purpose. That night, during a thunderstorm made of salt and silence, the hut walked away. No note, no stomping, just slow steps into the unknown. She woke up on the ground, the hut's imprint still warm in the soil, and a teacup sitting politely beside her. I made it too well, she says. Too much well, too much memory. The house wandered for 7 years. 7 years. She searched, of course, cast bones, burned maps, whispered into wells. The house left traces, shifts in wind, sleeping animals in its footprint, abandoned dreams curled under rocks. And here's the strange part. It kept moving through time. Not in time. Through it, slipping in and out of centuries like curtains. The trail was impossible to follow, until it stopped. Here, in this field, she found it collapsed. Not destroyed, not broken, just still. It had gotten lonely, she says. Turns out, even houses need someone to come home to. You both sit on the grass. The house settles beside you, legs folding gently under its bulk. It doesn't creak, it sighs. You ask what it saw while it was gone. She shakes her head. It doesn't tell me, not everything. But over the years, she's pieced some of it together through dreams, through carvings on its walls, through faint songs it hums at night when it thinks she's sleeping. It saw cities that never existed, glass towers carved from single gemstones. It walked through worlds without doors, where people never lived inside anything, only beneath trees that bloomed once every 100 years. It met another walking house, taller, thinner, perched on stilts of copper and bird bone that tried to speak in rhythms instead of words. And once it walked across a plain of ash where nothing had names, not the ground, not the sky, not even itself. That's when it turned around. You ask if she was angry when it returned. She looks at you, sharp and sad. I was grateful. The hut didn't knock when it came back. Didn't apologize. It just lowered itself next to her fire. Baba Yaga offered it soup. It tilted its door in reply. And that was that. You ask why it left it all. She says something you don't expect. Because it was afraid it was just a reflection of me. A puppet. A trick. You glance up at the hut. Its windows are closed, but you feel it listening. I had to let it choose me, she says. She reaches into the dirt and pulls out a tiny wooden figure, an old doll, burned at the edges. You can barely make it out, but it looks like a house, with legs. This was here when I found it, she says. I think it carved it for itself, a reminder. A reminder of what? That it wasn't built, she says. It was becoming. And that changes everything. Because maybe this story isn't just about magic or witches or revenge. Maybe it's about what happens when something you made learns to miss you. The field stays silent. The grass leans in close. You ask if it ever tries to leave again. She shakes her head. No. Now it just walks away when it needs space. Apparently, the house sometimes goes on little solo walks. An hour a day, it always comes back, usually with a new smell or an unusual dent. Once it returned covered in glitter, she says. Still haven't gotten the full story. You smile. But the hut isn't just a wanderer now, it's a home again. By choice. It lets her stay. It lets you stay. And you start to understand the deeper truth. The legs weren't just for escape. They were for forgiveness. A way to move on, even if the wounds were still sore. A way to search, not for something new, but for a reason to return. And in that reason, to become something better than you were before. The house shifts gently beside you. A talon presses into the earth, and the grass begins to whisper. The grass is whispering your name now.
Not in a creepy horror movie kind of way.
More like the way a grandmother might murmur it while folding your old clothes. Gentle, knowing, a little amused. You turn to Baba Yaga, but she's no longer beside you. The hut remains motionless, one clawed foot sunk gently into the earth like it's listening through its toes. Then you see her, across the meadow, sitting cross-legged on a rock shaped suspiciously like a question mark, spooning something from a bowl that steams in shades of violet and green. You join her. She pats the stone beside her. You've come far. You sit. Now, she says, it's time to talk about the mortar. Ah, yes, the flying mortar and pestle. Baba Yaga's other infamous ride. According to folklore, she soars through the sky in a giant wooden mortar, steering with a pestle and sweeping away her tracks with a broom made of silver birch. Honestly, the whole thing feels unnecessarily complicated. So you ask, if you had a house that walks, why would you ever ride around in a floating soup bowl? She chuckles. You don't always choose your vehicle. Sometimes your vehicle chooses your myth. Turns out, the mortar came first. Before the legs. Before the hut. Before even the feather. It was a gift, she says, or a punishment. Hard to tell. She explains that the mortar was given to her by an old god with mossy teeth and too many elbows. Some call him Veles, the Slavic god of chaos and cattle. Others just call him the curved one. He said, I'd need it to clean up after myself, she mutters. He wasn't wrong. The mortar could fly, glide, drift across treetops like a drunken dragonfly. But it had limits. It only knew where I'd been, she says, not where I needed to go. So she used it for errands, short trips, border hopping. It was fast, but not wise. The hut, though, the hut knew things. It walked to questions she hadn't asked yet. It turned left when she would have turned right and found answers she didn't know she needed. Once, she says, the mortar tried to follow the hut. It got lost, spun in circles for days, ended up parked in the crown of a thunder-blasted oak that now grows mushrooms shaped like spoons. The mortar was practical, the hut was philosophical, and eventually she had to choose. I picked the legs, she says. You ask why? Because they could leave. The mortar, for all its speed, was still just a tool. It didn't feel, it didn't hunger, it didn't grow jealous when she didn't ride it for a week. But the hut once moved an entire river because it didn't like the way the morning fog curled around the front porch. You ask if she misses it. The mortar? No, you say, the simplicity. She looks out across the field, which is now slowly filling with fog that smells like cinnamon and old letters. Yes, she says, but simplicity doesn't ask you to grow. You sip from your own bowl. It appeared in your hands while she was talking. You don't question it. It tastes like root beer and thunder. She tells you the final moment that made her commit to the hut. She was flying in the mortar above a field of frozen soldiers. Time had stopped, mid-battle, every man and blade frozen in a sculpture of death. The mortar hovered above it all, untouched. But the hut walked into the middle of it. And as it stepped, the frost cracked. Time began again. One by one, the soldiers turned toward the hut, not to attack, but to listen, as if the house had whispered something into the very bones of the battle. And then every single one of them laid down their swords. No one knows why. But she knew then, the hut wasn't hers. Not fully. It was something else, something ancient, and walking toward a truth she hadn't yet named. She flew the mortar home, parked it beside the garden, and never climbed into it again. Now it sits in the attic, used as a soup pot on holidays. You both watch the fog settle across the meadow. The house is still now, legs folded. A faint light glows from its eyes. No windows. You realize you've been thinking of it as a being this whole time. You ask if the hut is jealous of the mortar. Oh yes, she says, not looking up. But it knows it won. And you realize something deeper. The hut didn't just walk away from war or weather or time. It walked away from being a tool. That's why it's never just sat still since. Because stillness for it means becoming useful again. And the hut refuses to be used. It chooses where it goes, what it shows, who it lets in. You look back at it. It lifts one claw and waves. The wave is subtle, just a curl of the claw, a slight flex of the talon. Blink and you'd miss it. But the message is clear. It sees you. You wave back. You don't know why. You just do. Baba Yaga watches you, her face unreadable. Time to show you the village, she says. You almost ask which village, but something in her voice stops you. You follow. The fog opens, not parts opens. Like a curtain, revealing a path of cobblestone that shouldn't exist out here. The stones are old, moss-lined, and faintly warm beneath your boots, as if remembering every footstep they've ever endured. You walk in silence. The hut follows. Eventually, the forest thins, and there it is, a village, but not like any you've ever seen. The village of the forgotten. No sound, no wind, no smoke. Just still houses and crooked signs and windows that blink when you're not looking. You turn to Baba Yaga. What is this place? Her voice is quieter now. This is where the house goes when it remembers what it used to be. The village is full of huts. Not living, not walking, sleeping. Hundreds of them, in neat rows. Some have legs curled beneath them like roosting birds. Others are cracked, moss-covered, leaning into one another like old friends. They all look like versions of Baba Yaga's home, some simpler, some grander. They were once like mine, she says. You ask what happened. They were forgotten. By people? By stories? By themselves. She walks among them, running her fingers along a porch beam here, a doorknob there. Some of these homes were once bright, she says. Singing, glowing, dancing, but something happened. Time moved without them. And time, as you've learned, is cruel to things with memory. Some of the houses still hum faint, discordant. Some twitch when the wind changes. But none walk, not anymore. The hut behind you stops walking. You feel it. It's nervous. Baba Yaga kneels by one of the silent homes. This one belonged to Marushka the Quiet, she says. She made her house from willow and pine resin, fed it lullabies. It walked until it grew tired of listening. What happened to her? She stopped speaking. One day, the house did too. She shows you another. This one belonged to Anka Three Hands. She died in her sleep. Her house kept walking for a decade before it found this place. A haven for haunted architecture. Every walking hut needs somewhere to rest, Baba Yaga says. Even if it never admits it, you ask if her house will end up here. She doesn't answer at first, just looks at it. The house stands still. Then she says maybe, one day, when it forgets what it's walking for. That hits you harder than expected, because maybe that's true of all of us. If you forget your why, do you stop moving? You wander alone for a moment, passing sleeping porches and doorways sealed with salt. You spot murals carved into their sides, stories etched into timber. One shows a house carrying a wounded woman through a snowstorm. Another, a hut with wings, actual wings, flying above a field of swords. You wonder if they were all witches, or if some were just lost, people who needed something to carry them. You turn a corner and find a house smaller than the rest. No legs, just a simple structure, not more than a single room. Yet its walls pulse with faint gold light. Baba Yaga joins you. That one belonged to a child, she says. A child? She built it in a dream. It followed her for years. You ask where she is now. She grew up, Baba Yaga says. The house didn't. There's a silence after that. You return to your hut. Her hut. The hut. It steps forward, very slowly, then stops before one of the sleeping homes. Not too close, just enough, and lowers itself. The legs bend, the house bows. You realize what's happening. A moment of respect, house to house, memory to memory. You don't speak, neither does Baba Yaga. This is their language. A wind moves through the village, not cold, not warm, just full of echoes. You think you hear laughter from decades ago. The hut lifts itself again, turns gently, and begins to walk back toward the woods.
Back toward the stories.
You and Baba Yaga follow. Behind you, the sleeping houses hum faintly in the dark, like they've been reminded they were once alive. The forest takes the village back without a sound. Trees fold inward like pages closing around a chapter, and the cobblestone path vanishes beneath creeping roots and soft moss. You glance behind one last time, but there's nothing. Just the memory of rooftops, the curve of a dormer, a glint of old hinges catching non-existent moonlight. The hut walks slowly now. Not tired, just thoughtful. Baba Yaga walks beside it, her hands behind her back, her boots leaving no mark on the ground. She doesn't speak, and neither do you. The moment demands silence, and the forest respects it. Then finally she says, "There's one last thing you need to understand." The house pauses. A breeze picks up just enough to lift the ends of her shawl and tug at the edges of your curiosity. "What keeps it walking," she says, "isn't magic, not anymore." You look at her. It's longing. The hut creaks behind her. One of the legs shifts, almost bashfully. It longs, she says, for something it's never had, and never will. You ask what that is. Stillness, not the physical kind, not rest. Something deeper, something a house was meant to have. A place to belong, to be built for a person, by a person, to stand and wait, to host dinners, to watch children grow, to grow old. But this hut? It was never given that chance. It was made to flee, she says, to fight, to survive. It walks because it doesn't know what else to do with its yearning. And you realize something heartbreaking. The legs were never a gift. They were a wound. A beautiful, feral, thunder-footed wound. You ask if it will ever stop. She shrugs, maybe someday, when it's walked far enough to forget why it started. The hut takes another step, and another, and then stops. You're in a clearing now, the same one where the story began. Trees crooked like old fingers, fog curling around the ankles of everything alive. Baba Yaga climbs the porch steps. You follow. Inside, the hearth is already lit. The rug sighs. The chair beside the fire rocks once, then stills. She hands you a cup of something warm. No label, no scent, just comfort. The house creaks once softly, affectionately, and settles low to the earth. Not folding, not hiding, just resting. You sip. The warmth moves through your chest, like a memory being forgiven. You ask finally, the question that's been trailing you since the beginning. Why me? She looks at you, not like a witch, not like a guide, just a person with smoke behind her eyes. Because you were wandering, she says. The hut, she explains, doesn't pick people who are lost. It picks people who are ready to leave something behind, a version of themselves. A home that no longer feels like one. A silence too loud to live with. You came looking for magic, she says. But maybe what you needed was movement. Outside, the wind changes. Not direction, feeling. The trees sway, but not away from the hut. Toward it. The porch light flickers once, an old pulse, steady and true. And the legs, they fold, not to sleep, not to escape, but because for the first time in a long time, they've found a moment that doesn't need to be walked away from. You close your eyes, the warmth hums through your bones. You think of the houses in the village, of the feather, of the forgotten scroll. And then you feel it, not movement, but peace, and the house exhales. The fire dims, your cup empties, and the world begins to soften at the edges. Outside, the forest breathes slow and deep, every leaf curling into sleep. The stars, wherever they are, feel further away, but friendlier somehow, like distant lanterns waiting for your story to drift by. The hut doesn't move. It doesn't need to. You're warm, full, safe, and it's been a long walk, hasn't it? All those steps across myth and memory, bone machines and chicken legs, forests that remember your name and houses that crave more than shelter. You didn't think a story about a walking hut could be this gentle by the end, but here you are, somewhere between truth and tale, still breathing, still dreaming, and perhaps that's what the hut teaches best. That even if you've been built to flee, even if you've been walking your whole life without knowing why, it's okay to stop. It's okay to rest, to watch the fire flicker, to let the floorboards hum their lullaby of old footsteps and new beginnings. So let the world outside wait a little longer. Let the hut hold you. Let the story settle in your bones. And sleep. Sleep, knowing that some things walk not to run away, but to find their way home.